Okay, class. So right now we are honored to be here with a very important Googler, Dan Russell. And I'm going to ask Dan to tell us a little bit about himself before we get started. So
Sure.
Dan, why don't you meet my class?
Hello, class. Um, I've been at Google for a decade. A decade, yeah. I've been here since it was a relatively small company, and I watched it grow from 4,000 people to, I don't even know what the number is now. It's more than 55,000 people. During that time, Google search has changed from, a competent but somewhat limited perspective now of things it could do up to something where it's much more competent, has a lot more things here. My work here has been primarily to understand how people search. So what I do in the course of my daily work is I understand from the logs perspective, what are people querying for? Why is it that, for example, the query first, F-I-R-S-T, is always in the top 15% of most popular queries per day? I don't know. But that's my job, is to try to figure this out. I also do a lot of studying where I go out into the field and I do what's considered an ethnographic study. I'll go to someone's house and I'll watch them as they work, as they do their Google searches. I also will spend time at libraries, and I spend a fair bit of time shadowing reference librarians. So sitting behind the reference librarian, or in some places, role playing for the librarian, and answering those questions like, where's the bathroom and how do you get the printer to work? And what are the 3 best sociology journals? And so I do a lot of that kind of thing, understanding from the patron's perspective what's hard about Google search and what extent does the library satisfy that or not satisfy that, and to what extent people can formulate or not formulate their own kinds of questions, and what do they do? So that's what I do in a nutshell. It's an excellent job because I get to watch real people solving real problems. And I've done studies everywhere from South America through Kona, Hawaii Public Library, through people in Silicon Valley. And it's a fascinating job.
I forgot I was muted. So,
and I watch how people use technology. I'm fascinated by this.
Uh-oh. Yeah. So you got to know librarians pretty well through this job, I suspect.
That's right. That's right. So I like I said, I spent a lot of time both in the reference section, but also just talking to librarians. For example, I was at ALA last year or this year, and I've given talks to like SLA and Library of Congress. Name your favorite library. I might have given a talk there. So yeah, I spent a lot of time with librarians.
So we're honored to have this kind of intimate conversation with you. And what I'd love for you to share with my class is what should librarians know beyond what the average person who uses Google as a search engine knows? That's important.
Right. There's a couple of things that spring to mind. If you're a professional librarian, and I mean everything from SLA to children's library people, there are big trends happening that you probably should understand. So as you know, some places library participation is going way up. So for example, where I live, the libraries are packed constantly. Other places are not quite so fortunate, right? So they have declining patronship. And in those places, you have to figure out what is it that's not bringing people into the library. And so in Google's business, we're really the way we make money is on advertising. But the reason I bring that up is because we spend a lot of time trying to understand what brings people to our content, what doesn't work for them. And I'll give you an example in a second, but it's sometimes surprising. It's worth doing a little bit of market analysis to understand why people are coming and why they're not coming. Because unless you're really lucky, unless you're super lucky, they may not always come, and you should understand why they're coming now and what will change. That's one trend. So analytics, basically. Think about analytics for your library. Think about analytics for your patrons. When are they being successful, when are they not? Second big trend, the rise of mobile. Because everyone now has a smartphone, or at least a phone of some kind in their pocket, or a tablet they carry around in their purse or something, all of a sudden, the way place, and time to get information has really changed. Do you remember what it was like back in the old days, the bad old days, when you would have a question in the evening and you would think, I'll go to the library tomorrow and look it up? No, you did not. I mean, the truth is, if it's a pain, people won't do it. Well, now all of a sudden, now you've got Google in your hand. And I can just do it, or I can say the query to Google on my mobile device. What are you, as a librarian, doing to support that? Because it's a tidal wave. You're not going to push it back, no matter how much you like paper, how much you like print. It doesn't matter. Mobile is going to win. So how do we do this? How do we help people understand information with respect to this device? Now, don't misinterpret me, right? Paper is going to be around forever, right? We will still have libraries in 2050 where people will still check out bound codices with pieces of paper and index in the back and the whole thing. But increasingly, people are going to be looking for stuff on mobile devices. Now, will they be reading on mobile devices? You know, that's a hard question. It depends more on the local context. So in Japan, for example, where the average commute is like 90 minutes on a train, people read all the time on their mobile devices. They write novels on their mobile device. That sounds crazy. I can't imagine doing it, but there are some very well-known, well-published novels that have been written by commuters on their cell phone. That should tell you something, right? That should really tell you something. That all of a sudden, ebooks and mobile reading perspectives are really important. It's also important to realize that the search experience, that is the way you access information, is different on mobile devices. Partly because you've got this tiny little screen, right? And how do you actually deal with something that big and you're trying to read a large topographic map? Okay, there are still cases in which paper wins as a display medium. Maps is one. Encyclopedic collections is another. But I think as a librarian, these are two of the factors we have to start to think about.
I wonder about that, though. In terms of user behavior, do you think that the search, the seeking, the finding part might happen on the commute in the mobile, and then folks are storing these articles for reading later, or for analysis, or for culling on another device or another platform?
You know, that's an excellent question. I don't really know the answer to it. My suspicion is that they don't. And the reason I say that is because you would expect bookmarks to be the world-killing technology. It needs to be perfect, right? You're reading something in your mobile device, you bookmark it, you go back to your laptop, you read it later. I don't see people doing that.
I think what they're doing, I mean, as I'm watching people, I think what they're doing is emailing themselves, like hit the email button, or if they're in a database,
right.
Maybe not in Google.
Yeah, you know, it's the other thing they do is they share it to their social platform.
Exactly.
And so that's another kind of social bookmarking thing. Oh, Joyce, you should see this video I saw, right? Boom. Right. All of a sudden it enters your, right? And
then you pick it up on Rebel Mouse or wherever it is that the stuff aggregates.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So there are these aggregation sites. That's one. Facebook, G+, you name your favorite. And the downside of that, though, and I think people don't understand this, is that social media sites tend to be imperfect. They store everything, and that's fine. But can you actually get to it later? It's a little less obvious, right? Because as you know, a lot of those are stream-based. And this is actually something I wanted to talk about later, but since it came up now, I'll mention it now.
All right. And then we should probably get back to Google, because that's what I told them this was going to be.
That's fine. That's fine. But I think actually one of the deep questions about being a librarian these days is that we now have a multiplicity of different kinds of content. You know, it was one thing when we had books, we had a card catalog, or we had the pure article guide. That was one thing. And all of a sudden, we started to index these things. You get, for example, Google Books, which is a logical extension of the library in many ways. But now we've got different kinds of things. We've got Vines, we've got Snapchats, we've got these ephemeral media that don't get indexed in normal ways. Or you have social media, which is inherently a stream. So for example, when the stream comes by and you view it, you're getting your tailored view of it. You are not seeing all of the social media, not even all the social media that's directed at you. So you have to realize that when you do a search in that, you just scrolling through it, for example, you do a Control F in that stream, you may or may not find that thing that you were looking for. And you might say, well, it's not there anymore. It is there. You just have to figure out how to search for it. And search in that medium is different than search in the Google or search in, whatever, database you happen to be using. So it's a very different thing. And I think we need to get people to understand that.
So I've been playing with Topsy as a social media search,
Mm-hmm.
but there probably are some better things. I'm wondering if we could still talk social media search now.
I'm actually not an expert on social media search. I know how to make LinkedIn work really well. I know how to make Facebook work really well, and that kind of thing. But I've never used Topsy, I have to admit. And there are other platforms like that. But there are other sort of interesting things, like one of the tools that I use is Newsel, which is a way of putting in all of your contact information, and then it watches all the news feeds and pulls out. So, for example, I see Joyce Valenza wrote an article on this, and it tells me that, and that's kind of a nice thing. But it's not quite the same as what I think you're talking about being able to search across all the social media. And Twitter is another good one, I think, actually, but it's also heavily filtered in many ways.
Right, and there's so much to think about in terms of search and social media. We're going to have to get back to that in another.
Yeah,
for that the week we're talking about that, but it all kind of overlaps. But I think we're all looking for strategies to curate the stuff that we discover.
Yeah.
And then, you also need to recognize that we are all, I think there's a filter bubble that happens when social media goes by us as well, because we all choose our own little echo chambers, perhaps. What we want to listen to, we choose who we friend. So we're getting news that is of a certain type, right? And we're not getting the whole newspaper. We're getting an unglued and re-glued version of it. Which I find interesting, and then we get the news that we want, and we often ignore the stuff that we probably need.
Well, that's an interesting point. One of the things I find fascinating is that people don't often understand that the paper has been re-glued, like you said. And so, for example, when Facebook did their famous experiment this past summer about slightly tailoring the feed, filtering it to do different kinds of things, people got really upset about that. And I talked to those folks, and I discovered that the reason that people got so upset about it was that they didn't realize that their feed is being filtered constantly anyway. And this was just another filter. It was like, what's the big deal? And it was just another, and it was even a tiny, tiny filter. It wasn't even a big deal. I think all the social media platforms do much bigger filters for various purposes. But I think if you don't understand that there is this filter effect, you misunderstand the fundamental of this. For example, I think a lot of people don't realize that there has always been a filter bubble. I've had people say to me, oh, no. Back in the 50s when I was a child, there was no filter bubble. And that's nonsense, right? If you had a public library, somebody ran acquisitions there. Somebody chose which books to put in and which books to not put in. And those were heavily determined by the social, political, cultural context of the town or village or state or whatever, right? So the kinds of books you get in Texas are not the same kind of books you'd get in Seattle. The kind of books you get in Seattle are not the same ones you would get, say, in the library in Azerbaijan. It's just fundamentally different. And we have to remember that there's always been a filter bubble. The notion that there isn't a filter bubble is crazy talk. And I think this is one of the things we have to understand.
All right. So the thing is, I could talk search across the entire information landscape with you all day long, and
we would have fun.
We would have fun, but I think we need to talk about your specialty and your work at Google and what knowledge that brings to you that our librarians would really, and they're not all librarians, they're information specialists in a variety of different contexts. What should they know? What do you want them to know when you bump into them at a cocktail party or in a library?
Right. I love this, the elevator pitch version of my research. Do you mind if I do a couple of quick demos? Would that be okay?
Nothing would make me happier.
Okay. I'm going to go to screen share here. Give me 1 second to set this up. And then I'm going to switch over to here. So here I've got my my Google thing. And I'm just going to go through like 3 or 4 things really quickly and sort of see where it leads. So the first thing I want to talk about is a couple of basic things. So if I'm doing a search for, say, coral bleaching, there's a couple of things to notice here. First off, this thing right here, where you're getting an expanded panel, one thing to notice that I've seen a lot of people not notice is that we have this little downward pointing gray chevron. You see that right there? You click on that, that means expand this box, expand this little thing here. So I'm going to click on that, and guess what? We show you related topics. So in this particular case, it's showing you the expansion of other ideas about the same topic, the same concept. There's another thing to point out here. So that's one way to look at it. If you scroll to the bottom, so I've scrolled all the way to the bottom of the page, you see here searches related to coral bleaching. And these are ways to get outside of your conceptual box or conceptual set. So that's 2 ways to do it. If you get a panel here with a downward chevron, you can click on it and get some more ideas, some related topics, or you can scroll to the bottom and see roughly the same thing. Okay? Now, this box here for search tools, I'm going to click on that. And there's a couple of things you can do here, a couple important filter functions. So here I'm just, the default is anytime, but I can now filter for information about coral bleaching from, say, the past month. So if I'm looking, for example, for current insights into phenomenon coral bleaching, for example, there's a big coral bleaching event going on right now. And so I want to look at the past month. I do that. And this filter is based on posts that were made to the web in the past month. Now, truthfully, what it's doing is it's filtering articles, web documents from the last month from web crawls. But mostly Google gets around to all the web pretty quickly. So this is pretty much exactly what was posted within a day, say. So now you can see, if you look at all the dates here, you can see exactly that all these are from the past month, okay? One other thing I want to point out is that a lot of people don't know it. This is really useful for librarians, is this sort by function. Here it says sorted by relevance, and that's the default. That means the sort order, top down, is based on our relevance function. That is, the things we think are going to be best for you. I can sort this by date. So I just clicked on that. So I'm going to do that again. Click, sort by date. And now I'm looking at things from the past month from the most current one, which is this Tumblr post. And the problem with the sort by date is you sometimes get really irrelevant things in here. But,
Dan, could you just briefly mention how relevance is determined?
Sure. So my query, that is the words up here in this box, are run against our ranking function. So basically the way that works is that think of Google as having a giant card catalog of every card represents one page of one document somewhere in the web server, somewhere in the world. What we do is we take those terms and look at them against this giant catalog. And we've got a function called the ranking function, which takes into account lots and lots of different kinds of factors. For example, there's the PageRank algorithm, which says, here's a page, is this the most relevant page with respect to these terms, and which pages are most relevant that are connected to it? That's PageRank. Then there's things like, are these words next to each other in the document that you're looking for? Is this a well-known document? So for example, this very first hit here, NOAA declares third ever coral bleaching event. We know that NOAA News, NOAA.gov, is a very well-respected site, has a lot of links coming into it. And so that boosts this result, this first result we're looking at, up to the top. And we do this for billions of pages, essentially instantly. So the ranking function takes into account all these different factors. How good the page is, how connected it is, if it's got what we call spammy signals on it, bad things that people do, and so on. So that's roughly what that is.
And now, could you talk about, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but sure. I'm wondering if we talked about the sorts of things people learn in a searching class, like phrase searching and adding more words, what would be the value of that, and what are the things to consider if say I need I'm imagining right now, I don't know much about coral bleaching, and I'm beginning to find kind of background stuff
Yep.
that I really need. But what other, I don't want to blow the schedule of what you were thinking you were talking about. If it fits in, because the librarians, let's think about those kinds of needs too, if you don't mind.
I'll try to weave that in as I think about this.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. So I'm just going to clear all this stuff really quickly. And if you're trying to, for example, come up to speed very quickly on what coral bleaching is all about, this is obvious, and I know everybody does this, but I'm going to click on the Wikipedia article because if I really don't know anything about coral bleaching, hey, it's going to give me a first cut summary of this. And in truth, the Wikipedia articles are often very good. I mean, this is sort of an undervalued resource. But let me tell you a librarian thing, okay? Which is, you can look here and you can see the outline, so you're starting to learn the terms and learn the sort of stuff about it. That's fine. I'm going to scroll down. Now what I'm going to do is scroll all the way to the bottom, and now I've got this whole reference list, right? And people, just so you know, Wikipedians, the editors, they fight over these references. So in many cases, these are really high quality references. So as a lot of librarians know, Wikipedia is a great starting place. And these are now links to other places that will have high quality resource. For example, I can see, I'm going to do a Command F here and look for NOAA. You can see that NOAA appears a lot and appears a fair bit, for example, here in the reference lists. And you can start to see who's publishing about this particular topic. There's one other Wikipedia thing I want to point out. Go up to the top. There's view history. So what you can do here, if you click on that, is you can see all the edits that have gone on in this page. The reason that's interesting for librarians is if you go to a contested topic, say abortion or right to life, or you name your favorite Wikipedia topic, right? You can come into the history view and start to see who's been editing it and how and why. In essence, what you're doing is you're looking into the history of how the encyclopedia was created. So now that we're here on the View History tab, you can click over here on the Talk article, the Talk tab, and now you can start to see all the discussions about this. And so this is people who care about this topic talking to each other about what should go into the Wikipedia article, okay? This is a great resource for people who really want to understand this topic. So I just bring that up as an interesting point. So let me go back to the very top level thing, because there's another thing I want to point out. One skill I like to talk about is sort of cruising the different resources that we have. So for example, we have these different buttons here. We're doing web search now, but click on image search, because sometimes image search will give you a very different perspective on the topic. And coral bleaching is a pretty visual topic. So we got lucky. There's a lot of interesting illustrations here, and you can just sort of look and get, there's a nice image. It sort of tells you in one image what it's all about. But there's more. Look at the top. You see here, you have these different clusters of images, before and after, diagrams, maps, graph. This is a way of viewing clusters that we have found on this term. So if I change this to say, let's do frigate birds. Okay, I've changed the topic to frigate birds, and now we have totally different kinds of clusters up here. We have tattoos or blue-footed boobies or whatever, right? But let's go back to coral bleaching. Let's continue that thread for a second. Images is a great resource. The image clusters is a great resource, in particular because you can start to see things you probably might not have thought about looking for. So I'm going to scroll here to the right. There's only one more thing there. But you can see now if I click on this graph cluster, guess what? I get a bunch of graphs. No surprise, but these are all on the topic of coral bleaching. So that's kind of a nice thing to know about. Let me go back, and now we can go to news. And this is one thing I do a lot, which is when I'm learning a new topic, I will just click through these tabs at the top and sort of see what's going on. Well, here's some news about it. Here's some videos on that topic. We can look at books. And now, of course, you're back in library space, right? But I want to show you a really, sorry, this is going to be a kind of advanced thing, but it's so perfect for librarians, and it's such a powerful thing that I can't resist. So if this is a book about coral bleaching, I'm going to click on it and open up the book. So guess what? It's a book about coral bleaching. Okay, that makes sense. What I'm going to do now is to click on About This Book. You see where I'm at right now? Click on About This Book, and it takes me to the metadata about this book, right? So here we see all the normal metadata, when it was published, number of pages, and so on. We also see here related books. So this is the virtual bookshelf, right? If you had, and I didn't even know how many books there are on this topic, on this shelf, okay? I'm willing to bet that you've got a good library where you're at, but you probably don't have this many books on coral bleaching in your shelf. And this is your virtual shelf on this topic, related books. Now, if you scroll down a little bit more, you can see selected pages and the table of contents and all that. That's sort of what you expect. But I'm going to show you something very, very cool, which is down here in the bibliographic information. So this is all the metadata about this book, right? These blue links right here, these are Library of Congress subject headings. What you can do here is click on one of them. I'm going to click on limnology. So science, earth sciences, limnology. And watch what happens. Click. I'm now searching up, see up here at the top? Subject science / earth sciences / limnology. This is the subject heading. I'm using that as a coded phrase in order to find books with exactly that subject heading in its metadata. I don't know about you, but I think this is pretty amazing, because what I've been able to do is to go from a book or from a topic like coral bleaching to a book, find all the books, find related books, and then find what are the subject headings under which this would be cataloged. Okay. I'm not done.
I know, but this is really magical for me. I mean, I think that the depth that we find in books answers different kinds of questions from the questions that we need quick answers to. And so this ability has made me a better searcher for sure, knowing that Google Book is part of my toolkit. Right,
exactly. And I just wanted to show you one other thing. I could rant on and on like this, but I wanted to show you Google Scholar because a lot of people I've discovered don't know about this. Google Scholar is basically our collection, our compendium of the scholarly literature. So we get feeds from different publishers. We also do open access document crawling. So we go out and find a lot of these things. So let's do our example of coral bleaching. Okay. And when I do this search, what I'm going to do is find scholarly articles about this topic. And they're ranked by kind of, think of it as a citation index ranking function. It's not exactly, it's our own version of relevance, but it's roughly that. But you could see here, the very first article is cited by 2,600 other authors. So this is a highly, highly cited article, which would be difficult to find any other way. But what's also nice about this is you could also, for example, click on these other links, and it just gave you a quick tour. These are cited by, and so if I'm going to click on that, and these are the other 2,600 articles that refer to that paper we were just looking at. So I'm going to go back to that other paper. So you see what you get? You get the paper, you get citations, you can then walk forward to the papers that then back refer to the original paper. You can also see other related articles by clicking on this link right here. And guess what? These are other articles that may or may not cite this original article. I'm going to go back one more. This particular article, here's the PDF for it. So I can click on this. So this is an open access. I won't do it right now, but you can see, you can click on that and get to the open access version. And oh, by the way, there are 19 other versions of this paper out there on the web somewhere. Now, if you're writing a thesis or another paper of your own, say you're getting your EDD, you might want to know about this button, Cite, because what this does is it gives you the MLA, APA, and Chicago styles of the citation for this document, which is really, I use this personally all the time. So I can just copy this.
Me too. I love this.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can also send. You can also send to a citation generator or a RefMan or RefWorks or any of those. I love this.
That's what you're seeing down here. Exactly right. So yeah, this is incredibly handy. I use it a lot. And for people who are scholars who sort of do this kind of work, over here on the right-hand side, you can see this is my citations. So you can see these are the papers that I've written. This is my personal profile. If you've written a lot of papers, you're a scholar, you will have an entry like this as well. You'll see your co-authors and so on. And I've also set up a profile, as you can see with that thing we're just looking at. So this little bell here is showing me my updates. So if you're a scholar in a particular area, you can set up your profile such that when you click on that bell, it gives you other papers that you should know about on topics that you're interested in. Aha, yeah. So
I love this. But can I ask you a question about this? Is something I've wondered about. Does Scholar favor scholarship in a particular discipline?
That is an excellent question. No, it doesn't. It has better coverage in some disciplines than others. So if you think about it, this way. We've got a crawler. Well, we get a lot of feeds from scholarly publishers. We've got a crawler that goes out and looks for things. And the feeds, say, come from computer science journals, they come from medical journals, they come from wherever. And those tend to have better coverage. That is, there will be, say, 20 million medical articles, as opposed to another scholarly resource, which may only have, 2 million. So we will be better in some fields than others. Having said that, I think we have a slight bias in coverage for computer science and medicine and mathematics, and not so much for, say, linguistics. We do pretty well in linguistics. I'm just choosing it as an example, but it's the kind of thing where we actually have coverage. But the thing to remember about Scholar is that its base resource is gigantic. There was recently an interesting study done comparing using a professional database, a medical database like, say, PubMed or something. And PubMed is great. It has really fine-grained access to metadata. I can, specify which institution and which journal and all this stuff. And that's a little trickier in Scholar. But they found that the best practice was to actually go use a Scholar to get started and get a framework. Then use a medical professional database like PubMed to dig down deeply and get very fine-grained. And then go back to Scholar and then do the citation analysis from that. So I found that fascinating result. That was just a paper just published in the past few weeks. Anyway, so Scholar is really pretty good. It also includes legal opinions for the U.S. I don't know if you knew that.
I knew that. My husband's an attorney. So the other thing is, it seems to me that Google's been interfacing more with libraries in terms of the findability of results that may not be full text. One of the things I think that was interesting that you pointed out was that even though one version of a Scholar's article might be behind the firewall of a particular database,
right,
other versions might be available as PDFs. And you saw that available on the right side of the citation, as well as the possibility within the versions that are published. But right, I'm also seeing that Google is becoming the starting point for folks who are led eventually to JSTOR or some other sources that are not, that are beyond. What's that story?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. That's what I was trying to allude to with the using PubMed. So Scholar has incredible breadth. It doesn't have quite as targeted a focus mechanism as some of the professional databases. And so I find myself actually alternating back and forth. So it sort of depends on what my particular information need is. If, for example, I'm looking for something where I can use a medical subject heading term, because I need to do a very precise search, then I will go use PubMed or something like that. But if I'm just trying to, for example, which is more common case, I'm just trying to understand what is the current work going on in treatments for aphasia, then Google Scholar is really fast and it's free. And it has, the same sort of thing's true for legal research, right? Google Scholar has a lot of the legal case history and legal decisions in it. Free, great, and then you go to Westlaw or one of these professional things, and you get shepherdized cases and that kind of stuff, and you can get very fine-grained analytics for those kinds of things that you can't get from Google Scholar. So Google Scholar, in some sense, gives you this very fast, very broad ability to do discovery. Think of it that way. Mm-hmm. So personally, I alternate.
So what we've looked at are the various different filters, the tricks, the pull-down menus that might not be obvious, leveraging subject headings, and we didn't talk about the autofill. But when you're faced with a blank search box,
right,
and you want to search a little bit better than the average bear, what are the most important tricks that a professional would use?
Well, most important tricks. Let me show you something else. Okay, let me go back to the to this. I'm going to go back to Google, and there are I think the top 3 tricks. If I had to talk to a librarian in an elevator, this is what I would tell. There's the use of site colon. So site colon, like this. I'm going to say .gov. No, yeah, .gov. Let's do nasa.gov. And I'm going to say comment. Right. So what I've done in this is this part of the search limits it to a particular site. And this is incredibly handy because now all the results only come from nasa.gov, right? And in particular, this works if you change the search type to, say, images. And now these are all nasa.gov things, which is really handy if you're a teacher and you're looking for copyright-free imagery, and you can get it from nasa.gov. This is your baby. This is what you want to do. Okay, so that's one thing. So that's the first elevator pitch I would give. The second elevator pitch story I would say is file type. So file type, and this is what I use it for a lot. And I'll do, let's do JPEG, and I want to do comment again. Right. So what this is doing is I'm in web search here, but I know that all of these pages have comments, pictures on them, because I give JPEG, okay? But this is really handy when you're, say, searching for PDF files on a site like .edu on, say, coral bleaching. So you see what I've done? I'm searching for file type PDF on EDU sites on this topic. Okay.
So you're going to get content with some weight, because it would probably be a white paper or a major report if they saved it as PDF rather than made that into an HTML.
That's correct. That's correct. It's going to be some kind of publication. So a lot of places, in particular EDU sites, the universities in the US, will do PDF versions of their professionally published papers. So in particular, this very first one, this climate change thing, this is that most cited article, 2,600 sites, right? So what you're seeing here is exactly that. This is a published paper with a heavy citation index. So that's one reason you would do it. Now to pop up one level of abstraction, just a second. One thing to remember is that I've limited it to EDU sites. Now, what you might think is that EDU means university or college, and that's only true in the US. So for example, EDU does not include the University of Toronto, does not include McGill, does not include the University of British Columbia, does not include Mexico City, et cetera, right? It doesn't work anywhere except the US. It is a US-centric filter. So what you have to do is something a little bit more clever. That if you want, for example, sites in the UK, you would say UK like that. Okay, you see what I've done?
Yes.
Now I'm
Yeah.
getting only British sites. Of course, if I want to do, something more interesting, I want to search for Spain, I would do .es, España, right?
Mhm.
See where this is going. The other thing you can do, this is really fun. I'll just show it because it's sort of an interesting thing. NYC.gov. So here I'm getting all of the government sites for New York City. Makes sense? Now, if you look at these green URL links, right, I can see nyc.gov, nyc.gov, and so on. What I'm going to do now is say, what other domains are there? That is, what other departments are there in nyc.gov? So what I'm going to do is minus out site colon www.nyc.gov. What I'm going to do is ask for everything that's at nyc.gov without the ones that have the prefix www, right? And look what I get here. I get pubadvocate.nyc.gov, schools.nyc.gov. And so now I know there's a site for schools.nyc.gov. And now so I've discovered, in effect, the sub-organization of the school system for New York City.
Nice.
So that minus sign trick is, minus site is kind of a really nice thing for doing your own discovery. You can actually, there are applications you can get that will basically do that repetitively and suck out all of the internal domain structure of a site. But you can do it by hand like this.
Gotcha.
Okay, one last thing, one last elevator pitch. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is good. If I did a search for, say, California DMV regulations, what I'm looking for here is the DMV for California. It's a big document here. Holy cow! It's a really big document. Okay, so this goes on and on and on and on and on, right? And the question here is, suppose I want to find the section that has while driving under the influence. There's a lot of tricks you can do for searching, but what I'm going to do is do Command F, and this is in the Chrome browser. So if you look in the upper right corner, you see that's my search box?
Yes.
Okay, as I type influence, it dropped me down to that section. And so that's now the section. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I've discovered through my research that most people, 90% of everybody who walks into your library does not know this. And this is crazy. They don't know how to do a Control F or Command F. Or if you want to do it through menus, edit, find like that, right? They don't know that. And that takes, it slows everything down crazy. I mean, it's just insane to watch these poor people scrolling line by line by line through a 1,000-page document, and because they can't find it. So that's my 3 things. Those are my top 3 things: file, site colon, and Control F, Command F.
Great. So nobody will leave this class without knowing that.
Right.
Let me just ask you a couple. Just a couple more questions. Things I noticed where you weren't fussy about quotation marks around phrases. Was that because the phrase was so you knew it was going to come up right away?
Yeah. Okay. Coral bleaching is we call it a bigram. It's 2 words next to each other, and if I was doing, for example, bleaching coral, there's some weird kind of coral that bleaches everything out when it touches it. I would put quotes around that because that's a strange phrase, and the order of the other word is so common it would dominate. Okay.
Gotcha.
So, for example, my name Daniel Russell is super common, but the name Russell Daniel, which is also plausible, is less common. So I double quote that. So what I'm doing when I quote things is I'm searching for just these words in just this sequence.
Okay. I also noticed that you didn't take us into the advanced search. And, I think probably when you know stuff, you can do it in that search box. But what's your advice about advanced search in Google, and why did folks hide it so many years ago?
I worked on that project.
Tell me the backstory.
Well, yeah, the backstory is a lot of people hate advanced search, and it freaks them out when they get to it. So what we did is we only hit it a little bit. So let me do coral bleaching again.
You have to do a search before you can see it.
You got to do a search, and you come over to the gear icon, you click on it, and now you've got advanced search, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got the advanced search stuff, and this is the advanced search page. So the reason, if I had another hour, I would have gone into advanced search.
No, I just want this is just the drive-by.
Yeah. The drive-by shooting of advanced search.
No, I didn't. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. So I worked on this a while ago, and there's a much longer story I'll tell you sometime over a glass of wine. But the best use for advanced search is these couple boxes right here, because I can do the search for coral bleaching, but I can limit it by language. Now this is an English query, so I probably don't want to limit it too much. But if I did coral bleaching, say in French, I could limit the results to be only in French, right? But I can also limit it to region. This is not quite the same as site colon. I could say site colon UK, and that will give me the United Kingdom. But here, if I do this, I can get by countries that don't even have site names. Like Bhutan does not have a site name, right? But I can now limit it to different kinds. So there's Cape Verde, right? I can limit it by when it was last updated. That's the time restriction, and so on. And if I wanted to, I can use this last one. I use this fairly often when I'm putting together talks or presentations, filtered by Creative Commons license tags. So here I'm going to do searches for coral bleaching from Cape Verde. I have no idea if this will give us anything, but let's try. Oh yeah, look at that.
What do you know?
Now you know. There are only 5 results.
Well, you found them quickly.
That's right. And now I know.
And so my last question is, we are going to be looking at semantic search too. What parts of the Google results are semantic?
Semantic. Oh man. Do you have a plan for a future guest to talk about semantic search?
I think I will. Okay. I'll ask you offline to recommend somebody.
Yeah, that's a harder question.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
The thing about semantic search is that it's like it's always a year in the future. And so we don't have any explicit ways of doing semantic search now that you can use. But you're starting to see it. For example, when we do, I'm going to go back to screen because it's better to show than tell.
I think there was a grid feature.
Yeah, there's, let's try something like Centaur. I'm doing Cape Verde still.
And I'm also noticing your talk search there too.
So for example, let's try something else. Palo Alto. There we go. So this over on the right-hand side, this is actually not a regular web search result. This is, you can think of it as coming from the knowledge graph. So we call this a knowledge panel. It's basically, it's recognizing that this is an entity, and this entity has a lot of relationships. So this is the beginning of semantic search. So in this case, let's do another one like New York City. What it's doing is giving me a collection of information over here about that entity. So for example, these relations here, like the land area and weather and these are semantic relationships in our knowledge graph. So if you get the knowledge panel, then you can start to see the little leaking out of semantic relationships. But you can't yet quite do that. Although you can say things like population of New York. Before I finished it, it already anticipated it, right? I didn't finish typing it, but it got it, right? So for example, here's a query where the population of New York, we know that people most often want to see graphs, and they most often want to compare New York City with LA and Chicago. So you're starting to see it come in, but there's no explicit way to do it right now.
Gotcha.
Hope that answers your question.
It does, and I want to respect your time. You've already spent quite a bit of time with us, and I'm very, very grateful.
Sure.
Any final words before I stop the broadcast down?
This is only the beginning. There's so many more things to do. I have one more thing to show you because I can't resist it in the sense of final words. So I want to show you 2 things because they're great. At least I think they're great. One is my website, which you find by doing Russell homepage. That's my query. And the very first hit is always it. And it's basically my homepage, which has lots of stuff on it, including talks that are coming up that I'm giving, and presentations that I've given. And here's, for example, a TED Talk that I gave a while back. If you're interested in learning how to become a better searcher, here's more resources than you could possibly consume. Go wild. Have a great time.
We're going to include that in our syllabus.
Okay, great. The other one I'll show you is my blog. So that's my homepage. My blog for librarians, I think, is actually fantastic because every Wednesday I pose a question like this one. Here's a picture, and you know your patrons come in like this. Hey, reference librarian, here's a picture. Oh my gosh, is this Los Angeles? Is this I-5? How would you know? How would you? And then on Monday rather, I answer the question and show you how. So
Excellent.
On Monday, we'll talk about whether or not these are real pictures and how you would find out. So for instance, this was last week's. I asked the question, this is in Cape Breton, this picture here. Why do they paint their telephone poles like that? What's going on? And basically on Monday, I then wrote a blog post saying, given this, we can do these queries and find the answer. And I do that every week. I've done it for 4 years, so I'll probably do it for another 4 years.
What fun.
So, it's totally great.
I mean, this is my kind of fun. Anyway, I'm so grateful, Dan.
Sure.
Thank you for your wisdom. And I'll stop the broadcast.
All right.
And we'll save this for our students.
All right. Very good.